Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. There are a few fish that are near and dear to my heart, and one of them is the alligator gar, North America's largest predatory species, capable of reaching over 8 feet in length and in excess of 250 pounds. With a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth and armored scales, these fish are built for war. But still, though, many people only know them as a slow-moving bottom feeder, and a lot of anglers don't want to sling meat and sit around for hours baking in the hot sun, just sitting and waiting for a bite. It doesn't appeal to everybody. But these fish are predators. They will absolutely eat lures and flies. And today's guest is Danny Scarborough of Houston Fly Fishing. And he's joining to highlight the opportunity of chasing alligator gar on the fly. And during this conversation, we also take time to talk about chasing the smaller but respectably sized longnose gar, which can still grow to 5 feet in length in their own right, and by most measures is still a giant freshwater fish. And in many ways, they may be more challenging to catch on artificial lures than alligator gar. But Danny isn't just chasing these fish, he's also guiding for them. So he's tapping into the untapped resource that some of these non-traditional sport fish represent. So we're talking bowfin, carp, buffalo, and other non-traditional species, because these fish are still measuring points for an angler's well-roundedness and ability to solve puzzles. And you know that I couldn't let this conversation slip by without touching on some of the tactics that he uses for catching bowfin on the fly specifically. Now, Texas anglers like their fish big, and they don't get much bigger than the alligator gar. This is Danny Scarborough of Houston Fly Fishing. Yeah, I'm ready to be a radio DJ, but anyway, Danny, right?
Yes,
it's like your actual name's not on your Instagram, so I didn't want to sit here and call you Houston Fly Fisher.
Oh, yes.
Like, what the hell's this guy's name? But then I saw when you booked it, I saw it. But Danny, I appreciate your time. You know, I feel like I'm burdening the working class heroes out here, the guys like myself who have like jobs and get out and I mean, granted you're guiding and stuff, but.
Yeah, been pretty good lately.
That's awesome. Well, we're gonna get into that. We'll get into the meat and potatoes of it here soon. But dude, you have a style of fishing that interests me a lot. So I'm glad I found somebody who's done it and done it well. But I'm just gonna dive right straight into it. The alligator gar fly fishing thing that you do is like of major interest to me. So like really wanted to find somebody, but like find somebody solid that could talk about that, because I caught up.
But there's not anyone that's like hardcore doing it.
Yeah, and that which blows my mind. But I think maybe what we're doing now, like there needs to be more conversation around the fact that alligator gar aren't just big, dumb, lumbering fish that just eat meat off the bottom.
Exactly.
Because it's like that doesn't tickle everybody's fancy. You know what I mean? People want to throw lures. People want to throw flies. I've even talked to guys who, about alligator gar fishing, trying to sell them the idea about how awesome they are. And they're like, oh, that's cool. But then they always go to, well, will they take a fly? All they want to know is, will they take a lure? I'm like, shit. Like, just the simple fact that they get 200 pounds isn't enough.
Yeah.
But I really want to get into that because, dude, I've caught a lot of alligator gar. It's an incredible fish. But I think even though the public perception seems to be changing and people seem to enjoy the fish a little bit more slowly over time, they're still sort of lumped into that slow, dumb, bottom feeding fish category, and I want somebody here who can break that idea. But tell me about the alligator gar fly fishing thing you're doing. Just how you got into it, where that began for you.
Yeah, I grew up in kind of the Montgomery County area, and it's a pretty hot zone for alligator gar, obviously. So we'd always kind of run into them over the years and been dabbling in it and guiding like the bayou and stuff like that. We sight fish one every now and again, hanging out with the buffalo and stuff. We were mostly carp fishing, but then there'd be a 3-foot alligator gar hanging out. You don't not throw at it. He would snap a fly just immediately. And then from there, just over the years, kept finding these little spots, still playing with like the 3-footers and the 2-footers and stuff. But in the last 2 years, it's been like, let's try to get the big ones. Me and my other buddy I grew up with, he's been getting pretty hard into the bait fish part of it. And so I've been going out with him and trying to shun up with the fly rod. And most days I do, but he comes back and finds a bigger one the next time.
Yeah.
But so it's been just kind of that and learning kind of where they live, all the different habitat they live in, not just the rivers. The lake stuff's probably the hardest, but they're also in swamps and oxbows and things that they get trapped in during the hurricane and floods and stuff. So kind of find them in those zones in shallow water where we can sight fish them. And now in the last 2 years, doing it with 12 weights and looking for 100-pounder, trying to get bigger, obviously, but still trying to break 100 pounds after this year. I think our biggest, we didn't weigh it, but 69 inches. They say in the Aggie little scale is 83 pounds. But,
okay.
they hold their weight kind of different. They didn't ask for a girth. So guesstimate, but 69 inches is a pretty big fish. Still under 100, we know that for sure. But pretty big gar on a fly rod.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's like a style of fishing that's, I don't want to say it's being pioneered, but it's still new territory. You know what I mean?
It's like we're everyone that I talk to, we're all dabbling, kind of playing with some ideas off each other, find out what really works. And
I think that side of it is exciting because it's like, a lot of different kinds of fish, like as a fly target, like you have resources to like get online and figure out like the best fly patterns or best. I'm not a fly fisherman. So just word of, I don't know, caution to people listening. I might sound like a total buffoon. It's like, it's something I want to add to my repertoire in the next few years. And now listen, I can, I can do the fundamentals, but I need to get.
You'll excel with like shallow water sight fishing.
Yeah. Well, it's something I want to get into, but I'll just preface this conversation for people. I might use the most basic terminology. If I say the wrong stuff, that's fine. Okay. I'm listening with everybody else. But in any case, I love the style of fishing where you're chasing targets most people don't chase. Because it's like there's a lot more learning involved and there's a lot less resources of information out there. But it's like, I mean, I don't know, man. At the core level, it's just it seems like alligator gar or all gar are pretty opportunistic type predators that normally don't turn down an easy meal that comes within close.
Just snap it if it's within their nose. I try to cross close to their eyes so I get a better hookup.
Yeah.
But they can't. If it crosses their face, they see it. Usually they eat it.
That's what I was wondering. It's like, because like, what is the challenge? I know like a fly angler needs to know that there's going to be some challenge involved. But in my experience with most gar, not necessarily alligator gar, is that getting them to bite isn't the hard part. It's finding them and keeping them buttoned. Yeah. So I don't know. Let's start with like finding them. Like I know you mentioned that they're pretty much everywhere, but I mean, are you waiting to see them roll, or is it like, I know this is where the food hangs out, so we'll go there? Like,
there's definitely a bit of that. Yeah. If you're seeing air gulpers, rollers, whatever you want to call it, I mean, they're there. But yeah, if you're in the river system, I'm looking for swirls, slower water. They're not really going to be in the faster water unless they're just feeding hard, and it's harder to feed those fish flies in the faster water. You can switch to a full sink line and have success, but if you can find these other fish in the slower slack water hunting, that's kind of better. Lake stuff, same thing. You're looking on like flats, and trying to find them in those shallow places. Not as good at the lake alligator gar fishing myself, unless they're skinny, especially in the springtime when they want to spawn on like the flooded lakes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mostly on the lakes, I'm getting a lot of spotted gar and longnose gar. They seem to do better on the lakes, and most of the lakes that the alligator gar used to be on, they're not really as prevalent, at least on some of the Brazos system and some of the other systems that I've been on. For whatever reason, that they're not there anymore. But yeah, more longnose gar and stuff. But then the oxbow stuff too, same thing. Shallow water flats, looking for access to deep water, but they'll come up pretty far on these flats. Same thing on the lake, access to deep water, preferably river channel kind of deep water. And then looking for logs basically, or air gulpers with a tail that's wiggling or just cruising a little bit, or looking for eyeballs if the log's being completely still. Because sometimes, I've been tricked a few times by a log. It's super crazy to be like, is that a log or a fish? It's so cool.
Right. Because that's what I was wondering.
A lot of the tactics is just looking for areas where I know that they're going to be hunting bait, high chance areas. There's other places that you can find them, and then the fact that they're bimodal and they gulp air is big beneficial for us. And then in the slower parts, if you can't sight fish them, at least when they're gulping, and there's usually a lot of them gulping. If there's a bunch in one area and you sit there long enough, you'll see it. We can then go to our intermediate lines. Not as much sink. I'll do sink a little bit. Depends on the flow. Mostly doing a lot of river stuff for the alligator gar, especially too. We mostly do intermediates with 12 weights, slow sinking bait fish flies. I have stuff like they're really eating just like a lot of shad. Something that small.
Interesting. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, just I try to play with all the other big giant musky stuff and different things, but day in and day out, these little guys do it. This is one that's been chewed to shit and got a little 50-pound left on it. We're catching them on 50-pound fluoro. That's probably the lightest I'll go on the big ones, because we're getting chewed through on, and an 80-pound fluoro also. But I don't know. I guess that maybe covers most of the stuff. I kind of ripped some things out.
No, well, I'm going to keep digging, because I know, I can relate a lot of this to my experience with alligator gar and most gar. I fished the Trinity River and the Red River and a few smaller rivers in South Texas, like the Guadalupe and some little marshes down south of Houston when I was in Corpus Christi. And I never found opportunities. I'll say this, I've never seen an alligator gar swimming by. Yeah. And I was like, I tried. I went around my canoe. I went around my boat. I'm like, where are they? I don't only see them roll and then go back down. But I was like, I get so jealous of the guys that find them hanging out. So I didn't know if your approach is are you blind casting ever? Or is it strictly we're looking for fish and that's the only time we're casting?
Yeah, if I'm blind casting, it's 2 rollers or a bunch of air gulpers or something like that. We do, in the river, you got a pretty good chance at the blind casting. Everything else, not really. You really want to get out there and look for them, pull around. I pull my raft and stuff. Depends on if in the swamps and stuff, it's real shallow. Just pulling, looking for them in the kayak, slow paddling. Trolling in the boat can work too. Just things like that. Just high probability zones next to where you can sight fish them, and take your time. Be ready. Those fast snaps where they gulp, bloop, bloop. Sometimes if you can get boom to here, they'll sometimes snap the fly still. But ideally, if you are gulping and you're throwing the air gulpers, it's more level, kind of lazy. Then he'll eat your fly. That's what that big one the other day did. We had a long grindy day. My buddy had hooked one little, maybe 3.5, 4. I don't remember exactly. And I was kind of jealous. All right, let's go. We're done. Then that one just floated up, bloop. Threw a fly over it, 90 degrees, and ate it.
So is that the key to drawing the bite out of them? I've seen that a little bit out of longnose gar when I throw rope lures at them, is the closest thing I've done to any artificials for gar. It did seem that way. It's they were very specific. You needed to bring it across their face, T-boning it. And
no food really just runs into them. You really want to cross. To me, here's their mouth. Eyes here. I want to cross in this zone over their head.
Yeah.
Not a fear even. I want it here because even the alligator gar just have a little more gristle further back towards their eyes. And if you look at all the hookups where my flies are, a lot of times the best ones are back in there, not the tip of the nose. Same thing with the longnose gar, long bony nose. I use no rope flies at all. I just aim closer to the eyes, and they'll throw some hooks, but SC15, a little thinner gauge wire hook, it sets pretty good. Sometimes it doesn't even hook into him. The gap of the hook wraps around the bone, and he's just hooked in with that because of the barb.
Yeah, I've had that happen.
High probability areas, tip of the nose, probably not as much, and you can do that with a fly rod.
Right.
A little easier, yeah.
Yeah, because like the longnose gar would just give me fits. Like if it didn't come straight over their bill and they followed it, like, you know what I mean? Like if it came, like if they were able to turn and get behind it, they just follow it all the way to the boat.
Yeah.
Put their nose right on the edge of it, but never commit to snapping at it. Now, I didn't know if the alligator gar.
Puppy dog. Every now and again you get a real fast, lungy, musky kind of eat, which is really cool.
Yeah. But I didn't know if the alligator gar were doing the same.
Yeah.
But,
and then another thing for the longnose gar, I'll go to like really small, like size 8 hooks, like stuff that I throw at carp for carp bugs. 2X wire, but that size 8 hook really sets in good. The hard part's getting it back out, which I have big long pliers. My buddy got me. He got tired of seeing me bleed.
Yeah. Well, what I like is what you just held up. Now, like I said before we started recording, most people listen to the podcast, so they what you did was you showed the fly that you use for alligator gar, and I think a lot of people, maybe even myself included, when I think if somebody tells me they're going to go fly fishing for alligator gar, I'm automatically assuming they're throwing one of those big, musky flies. Like I'm just, you look at a fish like that can get 8 feet long and get these monster faces. Okay, that's more what I would have anticipated.
And they'll eat it, but day in, day out, they're eating the shad.
Yeah, what makes more sense. But so
with a few different things, even doing little tube flies where you can build your own as big or small as you want, and just always end up with a 3-inch, 4-inch fly.
Yeah. Well, then, the next thing you wonder is when you're talking about a fish that can be 10 pounds, and on the next cast could be 200 pounds, the variable in size is so crazy. I don't know, man. Like I just tell me about the fly itself. Cause I look at something like that and, I don't know any better, but I look at that and I become skeptical. Like, can that really handle 200-pound fish? Like, what are some of the benefits that, I don't know, that size hook provides? And
one thing for like the alligator gar, we're using like SL12s, this one or the short, same stuff they're using for tarpon, GTs and Christmas Island, stuff like that. I mean, you can put a lot of pressure on that hook. I've hooked the bottom of a lake and was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
It's hard to break it. But yeah, just stuff like that, strong hooks. Like I said, the SC15s that I'll use, same brand. And I'm not sponsored or anything by them. I just like these hooks. A little thinner wire, but better for the longnose gar, 1/0 size 2, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then with that one, an alligator gar will snap that hook if it's big. The SC15, but those SL12s are stronger. Then from there, picking the right leader and then tying good knots. The 12-weight fly rod can handle a 100-pound fish.
Right.
After that, I'm not sure. We're pushing our luck.
There's only one way to find out.
Yeah, exactly. I've already broke two 10-weights, so I know that was too light.
Yeah. Well, kind of what they're notorious about, maybe more so the longnose gar than the alligator gar, is like the difficulty in driving a hook through the bill. Yeah. It's just the hardware that they bring.
They're gonna throw hooks, and that's like with fly fishing, people will do like lift trout sets. Absolutely zero trout setting unless he's right at the boat and no fly line out, and that's your only option.
Yeah.
Rod tip in the water, preferably. Strip until he's jumping in the air or pulling line out. And the longnose is going to jump more likely. Alligator gar, if he's big, is going to take line out, like fucking take line out. and with a fly rod, they have backing. You got 90 feet of fly line, and then you got ever how many 100 yards of backing. And usually we're into our backing pretty quick with the big ones.
Yeah.
And in the river, they're going to aim for the current, so you're definitely going to see your backing if he's a big one.
Yeah, so like basically aside from a certain style of hook setting. It's just a game of odds. It's like I guess you just have to factor in. It's the same with bait fishing. You pretty much have to factor in a percentage of failure that you're going to have because they're going to throw hooks. But
yeah, it's gonna happen. One of the nice things is we've only been skunked like a couple times. There's just tons of them, tons of options of other fish and stuff too.
yeah,
And getting a big fish to throw a hook doesn't always suck.
right.
But usually we can at least get something in. Like the last day I went was one of the slower days, and we still got a 47-inch longnose gar. So it depends on how you look at it. We didn't get the alligator gar, but still big longnose gar and several of them. But
yeah. Oh, then I guess the other side of that, and I could see a little bit like I saw the loop knot of the older leader that was on there, but like your leader material, I kind of remember when I first started chasing alligator gar, it was like 2010. It was like the accepted norm was like you have to use steel leader, like steel leader at all times and huge hooks.
And they get leader shy.
Yeah. Well, I ended up moving more towards the Kevlar cable that they have now, like Kevlar string, which I think is just superior in a lot of ways. I do not like steel leader, but I was curious. At the end of the day, it's a sharp fish. I don't know if their teeth are really for cutting, but their scales can be sharp. The side of their body can be sharp. So I don't know what you're throwing leader wise on the flies just to combat. I don't know, just to have some abrasion resistance. What are you tying to them?
Typical setup, like I said, for the big ones: 12-weight fly rod, intermediate line like you throw for a lot of your carp and stuff, and then my butt section of my leader, which goes my floating line, usually 40 pounds or 30 pounds, probably 40, I think, 40 or 50, and then 20 to 30 pound middle section, unless someone's doing IGFA records. And then my bite, I'm doing fluoro, 50 to 80 pound fluoro. I've had a few chew throughs now on 50 pound, so I've gone to 80. I haven't had one chew through 80 yet.
Yeah.
So we'll see it's obviously still possible. But I see these guys use 200-pound line and crazy cable and stuff. And I don't know why.
Yeah, taking the challenge out of it a little bit, but
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
But still we're landing those fish, pretty quickly. Again, not 200-pounder, but we're landing them in 15 to 30 minutes.
Now landing them is always the interesting part. Like that was always the fun part for me. It's like getting your hands on them. There's like the hazards that are involved.
Yeah.
But I've seen your photos, and it's like sometimes you seem like you're in, I don't want to say regular boat, but then other times you're in this like, I don't know, what is it, a fly craft? It looks like one of those inflatable boats.
Yeah, I have a little fly craft that's just a little 2-man, but it's so versatile. I can put it into any water, just like a kayak. You can just throw it in anywhere. It weighs 100 pounds. And yeah, any situation I can or I need to, I can implement that. And if I'm doing river stuff, I have an anchor. If I'm doing the flat stuff on the lake or the swamps, I can put a platform back there and push pole and sight fish, call out shots, 12 o'clock, throw, on the right-hand side of that log, see if it eats, kind of a thing.
Yeah. What are you normally doing for yourself or even for clients? I want to get into the guiding side of it because I find that side of it so fascinating. Because dude, I never wanted anything to do with having them damn things in my boat, especially the little one, especially the smaller, like squirrely ones. But what are you doing when you're hooking them? Are you bringing them into the boat with you? Are you shaking them off boat side, or are you like taking them into the shallows? Like, how are you, because getting them unhooked can be, there's some dangers involved.
It depends on the size of the gar, what the person wants a photo with them or not. But I have these big, long, like foot-long pliers that have a little handle and a little thing that'll grab a hook, and you can kind of bloop, pop it off. So we will sometimes, if it's not what we want and we're still anchored up and not pulled off, just bloop right next to the boat. But for those bigger fish or whatever that we want a picture with, the only answer is a lasso. You can do it next to the boat. A longnose gar is going to go crazy. Alligator gar may be likely, depending on the size, but usually we're trying to bank them. Just get back there, bank it, slowly get up, run the lasso over the rod, get past the pectoral fins underneath them, cinch it up. A couple failures happen. It's probably the most likely spot to lose the fish after you've already done all that work.
Yeah.
But it's part of it. You can't net them. I learned that years ago, fishing some parts of the Brazos where I'd sight fishing for my kayak. Get one in, try to net like a little 2-foot, 3-footer. and he chomped right through my net. And then I'm hooked up through my net in a kayak, like, just cut the line, he wins.
Yeah.
So,
I've definitely had a few heartbreakers like at the bank, so I know how that goes. But I was curious about that, especially when I saw your photos. And then I know like lassoing was always tough, but I would think like the length of the fly rod.
Yeah,
it's like
it still makes it a little bit of a shit show, but yeah, with a friend, we can get it done. The right rope, like having a rope that won't cinch. You'll find out real quickly is important.
Yeah.
But
now, are you running the lasso like down the length of the rod and down the line? Yeah.
Yeah. So usually guys hooked up, I'll try to run it over down the line, over line over the fish's head, and then get past the fly and everything and cinch it. Going the other way, probably not a good idea.
Yeah,
that tail will hit you.
God. Well, I know that like what is I saw that you kind of bounce between Dallas and Houston.
Yeah,
that's not a small trek. Like that is, it's like two different worlds almost. Like
that's why I do it. That and I moved to Dallas, but originally I'm from Houston.
Okay.
Houston's warmer, stays warmer longer. My season starts with the white bass. We're hammering on them in February, sometimes January if it's warm enough. Usually January is cold, and I want that to happen at least.
Yeah.
But then we hammer on them until March, April there, and then I do a bit of Lake Conroe and stuff. It's still cold in Dallas till April. Then April, they start getting their white bass run, little waves day before, maybe depending on how it is.
Did you ever do any like the coastal or like tide affected sections of river for the alligator gar? That always fascinated me. The guys that are catching them in marshes right alongside redfish and stuff.
Yeah, one of the first ones I ever personally caught on a fly rod, I caught it in the marsh.
That's cool. Yeah.
Just threw a redfish crack fly at it, and got one. But I had clients catch them before me, which was kind of funny to think about. Yeah, so
yeah,
but we'll play in like the mouth of the Brazos, the mouth of the Trinity. There's redfish flats there too. Sometimes there's sharks in the mix with the alligator gar and stuff. So it's a good place to dabble. Any oxbows, swamps nearby to get fish trapped in them from hurricanes and flooding and stuff. But yeah, definitely something to think about, and wouldn't count it out. There's some big gar that goes saltwater.
Yeah, I didn't spend enough time around Corpus Christi. I always thought like the coastal fishing down there is so fascinating to me because I got to see that. I had a few bayous that just a couple miles down went out into the bay, and I saw a big alligator gar in them. I just didn't catch them. But I always thought it was so interesting. Alligator gar, you'd have mullet jumping by, alligator on the bank, but then a few miles downriver, you're in the ocean.
Yeah.
It's always cool. It's always cool where there's like shared territory with.
We have some swamps that are like oxbows of the river that just, from hurricanes, but there's gar in there, there's bass in there, warmouth, all these crazy carp, buffalo, there's needlefish, mullet, all these other weird things.
Yeah, it's weird when we get some of that in Florida, obviously. We don't have alligator gar, and where I'm at in Florida, there's a few obscure little rivers up in, but it's always fun when you can catch like a snook and a tarpon and then like a bowfin and a bass all in the same spot.
Yeah,
this is this is getting weird, but yeah, dude, the alligator gar, fly fishing stuff. It's now when you're out there chasing them, like is the alligator gar and longnose gar thing kind of hand in hand, or is that two different approaches? Is there like some differences there?
They're a little hand in hand. Really, yeah, pretty much hand in hand. The difference is just the regions. There's certain parts of like way up the Trinity, like Highway 30 around Dallas. You get past the alligator gar zone. There's more longnose gar and stuff like that. Same thing on the Brazos. You get to about Waco, the alligator gar zone. After that, longnose gar. So every river kind of has that zone. Other than that, same tactics, same kind of stuff. I'll find them hunting in the shallows, sight fish them. I'll find them rolling and take a long, slow gulp in, big areas of the river, and we can kind of wade up and sight fish them there. But pretty similar stuff. Again, just the hooks, the types of hooks I want to throw more often are different. That's about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They might eat saltwater sometimes a little bit more. It's just because they float. You get more opportunities of them floating higher. I feel like
I agree with that. Yeah, yeah. They definitely seem like they hang out higher in the water column.
Yeah, they'll hunt bushes. Like in slow water, you'll see like 30 of them in a bush.
Yeah.
They were on the Brazos, and there's like a creek that dumps in. There were like 20 of them with their faces right where the drop off, where the creek meets. Just hunting that. Just different things to look for like that. They're opportunistic, but they're bait fish eaters.
Now, why do you favor like a hooked fly over like, the rope fly, which is interesting? It's like, I don't even know if I'd call that a true fly. It's like a
Yeah, I would. I've been kind of weird about the pro fly. I dabbled in it. I didn't like the way you fish it. You like throw out, let the gar eat, and he'll eat it, of course. And he kind of like dangles his teeth up, and then you slowly pull him in. I'm
yeah.
more throw out, get the hook set, fight the fish. And so I didn't like that. And then there's always these rumors of like different materials that you use might rip off, tangle that gar's mouth shut.
Yeah.
And if he throws it, he's tangled up, he dies probably.
Yep.
So that's been the biggest deterrent for me was that I like the gar ones to live, even though, you might eat one every now and again. They're pretty good table fare.
Yeah.
Not that I want to promote too much of it, but they are.
Yeah. Well, the rope fly is like I don't know. I'd love to like maybe even bring somebody on here that talks specifically to it. I've done the rope lure fishing for them many times, but I stopped doing it a long time ago because I don't know. I kind of agree with you. Like I prefer to like hook the fish.
Yeah.
It feels weird. It's like the success. Like if they bite it, like if they bite it, at least for me, it was like you pretty much guaranteed catching the fish. But I also felt like, in my opinion, I felt like they didn't fight as hard. It was like an awkward fight too. It was like
weird wiggle.
Yeah, it was like they were more confused than trying to get away. And then when you get them boat side, it kind of changed a little bit. But it's also just the pain getting the rope out of their beak.
Not worth all the hassle.
It's such a pain in the ass.
I try to get people away from it for those reasons.
Yeah,
it's so popular in the Midwest and on the East Coast stuff. And
it's unique. I mean, it's cool in that it's like unique only to one type of fish. Yeah. It's just like I don't know. I think it's a fascinating way to catch a fish because there's no hooks. But yeah, I think it's guaranteed. I've had some where I was like, man, if this thing would have broke my line, it would have been toast. Like guaranteed. Exactly. It's a goner.
If someone does that, immediately ties on like a 12-pound leader, 16-pound leader, they're gonna cut through that.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people whose leaders go all the time, so I can only imagine what's happening.
Now the longnose gar, it interests me because they live sort of in the shadow of the alligator gar, especially in Texas. Like here in Florida, they're awesome because they're like the big one. You know what I mean? And ironically, and really frustrating to me, everybody here in Florida, it makes me want to bang my head against the wall. They call all of them alligator gar.
Same around a lot of places here.
Yeah, like that's not an alligator. I shouldn't care that much. It shouldn't matter.
I was on the Buffalo River, and an 8-year-old kid was saying it, and I was like, no. Yeah. So I'll correct the kid. So what can I say?
I know. Oh, I was the same way. I correct him at the aquarium. I went to the aquarium. There was like I wanted to go see the gar, and there's a little boy there. He's like, "Look, Dad, swordfish." I'm like, it ain't a swordfish. Like, all right. Then I realized I'm arguing with an 8-year-old kid yelling at some guy's son. I was like, I better cut it out. Like, swordfish. But still, like in Texas, I feel like they live sort of in the shadow. Like people, like alligator gar having there's like a renaissance of sorts going on with them. You know what I mean? Like
there's definitely a good alligator.
Yeah, they're like, sure. Yeah, man. But people are coming on to it. People are traveling from other countries. Yeah, they're really sort of hitting it big. And I try to let people know. I was like, man, you got to check out their smaller cousin because this is still a fish that can get 60 inches long. Like they still get.
Our biggest is 55 inches. I think the state record is a fly record at 60 inches. Yeah. And I've seen one on the Brazos connected, another river connects that I thought was a giant alligator gar, and it was a longnose. Yeah.
For whatever reason, man,
I would like to catch that one. That's for sure.
I've encountered
probably pushing 40 pounds, 50 pounds.
Yeah. Now I've seen fish in the high 50s here in Florida, but they just don't have the mass of the ones in Texas for whatever reason. I can't figure. It seems like we have all the resources for food. We got the longer year that's warm all year long. They can be feeding all year long. And so, like, we'll find these giant longnose gar here in Florida. They got great colors. That's about all they have. Like, we'll find them in the springs here, like in the crystal
Yeah.
clear springs, giant ones, but they
Cool
just don't
place
have the
though, to
mass.
do it. Yeah.
But man, we caught a couple in the Red River, but like, between Oklahoma and Texas that were
And
that were
about an
like,
hour.
60-inch class fish, but as big around as your thigh.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
and
Some
that's
of them
an
just get thick. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
And these are predatory fish that will tail walk, that will eat lures, that are hard to hook up on, that you got to work to get. And I'm like, man, this is like such an appealing predator for people that
Yeah.
want a challenging sport fish on fly gear, on lures. So like that one's interesting to me. And you sort of answered it. I was like, curious, like what your top end fish were. Well, like what's considered, like, I don't know, for people that are listening, I got people around here, they'll see a 40-incher and like, they're huge. I'm like, well, they get a lot bigger than that, buddy. Like,
Yeah,
what is considered like,
40 inches, like you'll find them in most places that they are here.
yeah,
When you're getting into 50 plus, that's a pretty damn big one.
yeah.
But,
It's like the 50-inch
there's some
marks.
unicorns in the hill country. There's some unicorns here and there, but yeah, over 50 is a pretty good one. You can get 45 incher most time trying. Yeah, pretty.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'd say
It seems like in like, I don't know if you want to say gar community, but like the small circle of people that run in the gar game, it seems like 50 inches has always kind of been like
that's a
that.
good fit.
Yeah, it's like the agreed upon measure of that's like your trophy class longnose gar. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if you agree. I feel like once they hit 50 inches and above, it's like it feels like a different fish.
I
Like to
think
me,
so.
like they don't
Start
fight
fighting
like
back, they jump like crazy.
yeah.
I mean, if I could catch them 50 inches all day, every day, I would definitely be doing it.
Oh my gosh, man. Me too. I don't know, dude. It's like I've caught a
They
few
have
like
days where we're just like on a bunch of big ones, but usually it's kind of rare to get one over 50.
yeah, I've been surprised by how powerful they feel. Like, you think of a long, skinny fish not using the power game. You think, okay, this thing's going to be thrashing and jumping and head shaking and getting squirrely on me. But like, I've been real surprised at how hard some of like the 50, 55-inch, like bigger class gar, like dig, like and power
Yeah,
game you.
they're still taking line out. We're sometimes confused if they don't jump, thinking they're alligator gar. I mean, they
Yep.
fight that hard for sure.
I've
They're
seen
awesome.
that too.
It's
I
like,
don't know, man.
I'm not sure. And then he finally jumps. It's like, tricky son of a bitch.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I don't know, dude. It's like you really want to see more people, or maybe you don't want to see more people getting on it. It's like you have the resource all to yourself to a point.
Yeah,
But you
like to see less poaching them, less killing them for no reason.
Yeah.
Again, great table fare, but don't just throw it on the bank. Don't poach them
Right.
illegally, which we see. If you go to Livingston Dam and you sit there long enough, you're going to see poaching happen.
Yeah.
And it's almost every day, if not at least once a week, which is insane to think about.
Yeah. Well, I was there. The most recent time I was there in that precise area was like 2 years ago. I was there. And yeah, you find the dead ones on the bank. Like, man, like.
Yeah. And it's crazy because there's guys there that are there to eat them. That's what they're there
Yeah, eat the damn things.
20% of people that just.
Yeah. Well, some of the carcasses that I saw, like it was clear that they had been cleaned out. I'm like, well, that's not really, I don't care about that. Like,
at least he did something with it. Yeah. I've been looking for one of those where they did that, and he's got a big old head on it still.
Yeah, I know.
Not feel bad and put it in an ant pile.
Right. Well, looking through your stuff is awesome because like you're fly fishing for a lot of these meat eaters. You know what I mean? Like I love to put fish like alligator gar, longnose gar, and even bowfin, which is even in more recent times you're starting to see them pop up every now and then. Like oh shit, like there's somebody that's made an article in Field and Stream about bowfin. Like I never thought I'd see the day, but
yeah, I feel like I got on bowfin pretty early, and when I was doing it, there was one guy fly fishing on Lake Champlain, and he had like a YouTube video. That was the only information. And then there was Dr. Solomon David.
Yeah.
And he had the scientific write-up on about their like spawning habitats, temperature range, bait fish. And I put those two together in Time on the Water, and that's how I figured it out. There was no other videos, nothing.
Yeah.
Barely anyone catching one on conventional that wasn't like, damn it.
Yeah. Now, I have chased bowfin longer than any other fish I've ever chased, but I've always been the guy slinging meat at them. I've don't get me wrong, I've fly fished for them as well.
I caught them on bluegill as a kid. I mean,
Yeah.
I lived where they're from. I caught them on crawfish a bunch.
Yeah. I'm much more interested in how you're doing. I've had a couple other guys on here. The guy you're talking about that's doing it on Champlain is Drew Price.
Yeah, Drew.
He's been on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm aware of.
Drew's awesome. He's been a big proponent for him. He's been on this podcast. There's a guy now in Michigan named David Hurley.
Yeah.
He's been on the podcast. There's a young kid in Georgia, still newer on the scene, fly fishing for him in like the Okefenokee swamp. He's been on the podcast. But what I like about it is like you got a guy in Michigan in the Great Lakes fishing for him in crystal clear water. You got a guy over in Vermont fishing for him on like, right there near Canada. Got a kid down here in the southeast fishing for him in Georgia. Now I got you over here in Texas. So it's clearly evident that it's like a style of fishing that's budding up. But I love to see the contrast in people's styles. And there's a guy, Grant Alvis. I feel like I'm shitting on the guy, but he's real big on it, and he's been on the podcast as well. I got all the bowfin guys.
That's
what I
awesome,
mean? Like, and he's doing it in Virginia, which is interesting because he catches them right alongside snakeheads. It's an interesting dynamic.
That's why I'm going to do the snakehead thing still.
I've done it, and I fished with Grant. I fished with this guy, Josh Dolan, and it's just like, that is a phenomenal style. For a fish that looks similar to bowfin, it's not the same. Not the same thing. You'll catch them side by side, but and we'll get the same thing here in Florida. I got a couple of canals here in Florida where I'll see bowfin and bullseye snakeheads together. Man,
it's the bullseyes, not the northerns.
Yeah, I want to see them.
You gotta catch the bullseye too.
I'll maybe this is a controversial take, but I believe the bullseye actually fights harder than the northern snakehead. You wouldn't think it because they're longer and
snaky.
They're longer and more slender in the northern snakeheads that got that heavy body. But dude, I'm telling you, the bullseyes they throw down like that. That is man. They're a brawler. I put them up there in some of the hardest fighting freshwater fish of all of them, like pound for pound. But my heart is with the bowfin, and I want to stick on that topic.
Yeah.
Because I think that might have been how I found your page. Like that was my entry point into finding your Instagram page. Is I follow like #bowfin. I follow like all the bow. I want to see some bowfin stuff.
I think all the bowfin nuts follow that. Yeah.
Yeah. There was this video you had put up in some kind of swamp where it's like this laid up bowfin. You probably know the video I'm talking about. It's looking straight. I mean, this thing's looking straight at you. You can see it clear as day, and it looks like it's in like 6 inches of water.
Yeah, way back in this swamp, and almost the furthest back she could get.
I mean, you're way in there, and then you lay this fly down on it, and just got this awesome video to eat, and I was like, "That's badass." And so tell me about.
Was so good.
Tell me about that, because you know what I mean. Like, I like I said, I've had all these guys on here, and I sort of ask them all the same question. So maybe I'm being repetitive. I don't care. I love this fish, and I like to know how people, because like it's one of those fish that has a lot of detractors, has a lot of people saying they ain't worth the shit. Like why like you shouldn't be chasing them. So like, how did you, have your reckoning with the fish? Did you just catch one before you heard the negativity, or like how did you stumble across them as a species?
So I grew up where they're big part of their region where I am. We're in the pine tree forest. Sam Houston's just above where I'm from. So we just all the time as a kid, every little pond, nook and cranny, you'll find them just about, especially bait fishing. Occasionally working a lure, mostly like a worm or something. Occasionally you get a topwater frog eat or something, but that was my introduction. We'd catch them all the time around town and stuff, mostly like, oh, dang. But then later on in life, I started fly fishing. It was about 12 years ago or so. And I'm out on Lake Conroe fly fishing for grass carp. And I think I hooked like 5 that day. They all broke me off. And I was like, fuck these grass carp. I'd been seeing these bowfin and contemplating it for 6 months for some. It took me this long to like contemplate it and decide to go do it. And finally, I was just mad at them, tied on a little crawfish fly. I went to where I'd been seeing them rolling and caught 4. I was like, well, shit, that was easy.
Yeah.
And then, I was like, oh, they fight. They're awesome. So from there, started blind casting for them, reading up on them, throwing the rollers though. That's how I started, and slowly started putting together that I could sight fish them on the flats out on Lake Conroe. And there's just these awesome grass flats and little creek swamps and stuff where they come into vegetation, log structure, things like that that I'm looking for, and just pulling around in the kayak and in my fly craft, sight fishing them like little crawfish flies, like bead chain, almost like a redfish style fly, bunny
Yeah.
tail or crown fur. Just getting that weight right because you're throwing in the grass. If you go too heavy, it's in the grass, it's gone,
Mm.
and they'll lose it. But you really want to see it. But like say like that laid up bowfin, she's staring at us. She sees it. She's fully aware that we're there. They're
Mm-hmm.
a predator. They're not scared of anything else. That's one of the nice things about them. We can pull in and oh, she's staring at us 10 feet from us, and we'll still eat a crawfish fly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that fish we threw to her a few times, and I have a few different clips of it, and she really wasn't having it. But for whatever reason, when he threw over, like she's faceless, when he threw over her, bounced back, she was like aware of it, but it came up and it hit the top of the water and made ripples. Goes back down, that triggered her.
Yeah.
So it's something with this little nose mandible, lateral line sensory, little things like that, especially going over and coming back, that will just trigger them. And then you get that fin wiggle, and that's their personality, their thought process to me. Watch that fin. It'll wiggle a certain way when they don't like what they see, or when they're thinking like maybe they do like what they see, or when they're really fucking happy and they're like smoking it.
Yeah.
Half the time I'm like, oh, and then
Yeah.
he smoked it. Like, yeah, like you get to see all that, and it's in their person. So that little fin wiggle thing has just been hard in my mind ever since, and I'm chasing it. Bigger fin wiggles, more fish. But yeah, I've been doing that. Caught the state record on fly a few years ago with a client. The guy has
Ooh,
since beaten on Lake Fork, so I got to come back for vengeance and beat that guy.
that's awesome.
But
How big was it? I got to ask now.
yeah, the one that my client caught was like 7 point something.
Okay.
The guy now on Fork has it on fly because the conventional record's way bigger. Is like 9 point something pounds.
Mm.
Pretty big bowfin. I've caught a lot of 8s, a lot of maybe that
Yeah.
were bigger if I weighed them, but not really too many over 10. I've seen one that I thought was a grass carp one time.
Yeah.
I know he was bigger.
Yeah. I've
But
been fooled a
yeah,
few times the same way to thinking that they're a grass carp. It's funny, their body
and that little
shape is sort of similar.
hinge too. I was
Yeah.
like, oh no, and he was going away.
Yeah.
But yeah, through the years, I've been seeing them forever and read up on it. Put time on the water. I pulled all kinds of. I pulled all Lake Conroe pretty much. But since then, I've learned them. Lake Houston's a little too dirty, but that's like the next nearest lake. I've learned them on some of the swamps that are like oxbows of the Trinity, the Brazos, and stuff. And then I got them on Lake Fork, Tawakoni, Hubbard, Caddo, all the stuff up here too. Been learned because
Yeah.
it's the closer the better to me. I'd rather do. I'm right on Hubbard. I can drive 30 minutes and probably catch a bowfin right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so been going bowfin nuts.
Now, are you the same way? Like, is it more of a? I mean, are you strictly sight fishing or like predominantly sight fishing with them?
Yeah, now that I've like early on, no, because I was learning it. But now that I've learned the sight fishing game, that's like what I want to do. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
waste anyone's time. I just want to let's go find it, do the hunt. I'm big. That's like with the fly rod. I'm big into spot stalking with a fly rod, basically. Same thing with the carp, all the other stuff. I just want
Yeah.
to sneak up, make the shot, trick the fish, and do all the rest of it. And that's where I equate the fly fishing stuff to like if you're a hunter, the bow world.
Yeah.
It really does have some crossover.
Yeah,
And
I like how you relate it to hunting. I kind of get the same way. Like when I get the itch to go chase bowfin, like with lures,
yeah,
I mean, for me, it's like sight fishing or I'm not doing it. Because
yeah,
like, I mean, especially for me, like if I get out slinging lures, I'm just gonna be catching bass. You know
yeah.
what I mean? It's like so it's like a lot of time, but yeah, it's it's interesting too. Is like how close are you getting? Are you like, are you seeing them from a good distance and launching it, or are you kind of like just jigging it on front of their face, or like?
Definitely a mixture. We've had 20, 30-foot shots. In the thick vegetation, that can be hard, though, especially if you're not proficient with a fly rod.
Mhm.
But like I said, they're so in tune with their environment and not scared of anything. The only predator is me or a couple guys that target them. That's their only predator ever. they feel a boat and they will just come and check you out. Like, hey, what's that? What are you doing?
Yes.
We've been having lunch in the boat, and like all of a sudden there's a bowfin on the left and the right. Like, so it's playing off of that instinct too. It'll work out in your favor. Sometimes just taking that break in the thick of the shit where you know they should be, and they'll,
Yeah.
oh, there he is.
It's so funny you're describing that, because I've had the I've had the same story with all these guys I just mentioned earlier. Have brought up the same thing, where there'll be times where it has happened to me, because I do a lot of canoe fishing, and a lot of times I'm bait fishing. So like I'm sitting there anyway, just like chilling, waiting on like, one of the floats to go off, and all of a sudden I'm like, the hell is that? And I look down and you just see that fin go. I'm like, they'll come up and like put their nose on the canoe and be like looking around, like, this thing is checking me out. Like,
yeah, just curious. Their little brain has something going on in there.
Yeah, that is so funny.
They'll eat 2 feet from the boat.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you described that. So, okay. So, and I know we talked a little bit about, I feel like you have the same issue with bowfin that you do almost with gar, and that they're sort of difficult to get a hook to like really stay. So they got just a tough mouth, and they're so good at getting off.
Can I get too ahead? You were talking about Drew Price earlier.
Yeah,
his video 10 years ago that I saw on YouTube or whatever. Maybe you've seen it, where he splashes the paddle to attract the boat.
He called it like a splash bang or something like that. I forgot what he called it. He described that tactic on the podcast.
So I've had success doing it with a guy during the spawn, high water scenario. Saw his video, always wanted to pull it off, This fish was 4 feet back in the bushes, colored up green male. And this guy I'm with is just hammering. He's caught big bass all day, big bowfin, just having an incredible day. We get up to this bowfin and I'm like, let's try the splash thing. Splash it, and the bowfin stops, turns, splash it again. He comes all the way to the tip of the bushes. Yeah. Drop the fly. And he drops the fly and smokes it. Boom. Fucking Drew got us one,
Yeah.
So cool. But to build on that, we let that fish go, get our pictures, go catch a big female that's like 6 pounds. Let her go, come back. That bowfin's in the same spot back in the bushes. And we're like, see if we'll do it again. Splash, comes out, eats, just crazy. Yeah. Like, bowfins don't get it. They don't get it.
I know.
We had that one on the bayou, eat, break us off, go back to throwing us some carp. One slid back up, could see the fly in his mouth, put another fly back on him, eats it,
I have seen that happen as well. Well, I've never caught the same fish twice, but I've had like them all the way buttoned and hooked and like fought all the way to the boat and then get off and swim off. And I watched them retreat off to the bushes, go fish around a little while, let them calm down, come back like 20 minutes later, and they eat again.
Yeah.
Like most fish won't do that, but it's like, I don't know. They're like machines. I'll have to send this to Drew. He'll get a kick out of that. That his method. Somebody watched it and found success with it. But
it's mostly in these high water situations, because we're catching them in such shallow water all the time. Mm-hmm. But when we get spring floods, it works.
Yeah. Well, for me, like a lot of the bait fishing I do is I don't know, man. Like a lot of times when I go bowfin fishing now, like 90% of the time, I'm like strictly looking for the giant ones. Like I've gotten to a point now where like I'll go bowfin fishing for an entire day just to catch one, but it'll be a giant one. But I thought about like what Drew mentioned, like they're just attraction to disturbances on top of the water, and I'm like, I use a sliding float, like a balsa float that's just, they just slide up and down the line. I'm like, I want to try using a popping cork, like what you do, like when my bait's sitting there and hadn't been touched in a while. I'm just trying to draw them. I stick my bait along the grass line. We have like hyacinth mats that they get up underneath, and I need to draw them out. I'm like, I bet if I throw like a popping cork and just on the occasion just go pop, pop, it'll at least bring them out. Need to try it.
It's so weird about topwater though. Like trying to sight fish them where the topwater is damn near impossible.
Yeah, it's funny.
They'll fall all the way to the boat, but you like almost have to like not know they're there, come over, just ripping it, and get a surprise.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. Well, you really get the stark contrast between them and the snakeheads, because we're throwing frogs in like Virginia.
Yeah, and they love it. Yeah,
and what I noticed is like In my experience, anyway. I don't know, dude. Like Virginia was weird. It's the only place where I've seen bowfin like come from a long distance to come hit a topwater lure. Like for me, like everywhere else I've ever fished, it had to be within. And I guess that's a good question for the fly fishing. Like their strike radius seems small. Like it has to come near them.
I think you want within 6 inches of their nose, really. Like ideally,
yeah.
We'll get some that maybe will move 2 feet, but not trying to lead them 2 feet most of the time.
Yeah. So I always figured like
we throw the fly out, and when he sees it, from there we're reading his body language. What's he doing? If we twitch it one more time, will he do something? You know, like things like that. We're going off of that fin wiggle and his personality.
Yeah, the fin wiggle. I like that you mentioned that because
flies there or not.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that is an observation that I've seen too, and all these other guys mentioned the same thing. It's like if you can just get that fin when they're laying there like totally still.
Yeah.
Because I've had moments here in like the Everglades. There's bowfin everywhere, and there's all these canals all over the place. I can just walk the entire length of the canal, just pick which bowfin I want to catch. Sight fishing for.
Got it bad.
Yeah, and well, the problem is all these Florida gar. I don't want to shit on gar, but like, golly, it's hard to be. And there's so many of them. Like, talk about. So you'll have this blanket of. I'm talking thousands of them. I don't know how anything else survives in these canals. Just getting the lure or the bait below them where the bowfin is at is like the hardest part of the whole thing. But anyway, I'll have these times where I'll see bowfin. I'm like, they must know I'm there. And I'll just like literally be jigging a crawfish off of their forehead, smacking them in the head with it.
Yeah.
They're just that fin doesn't move. But yeah, it's like if that fin begins moving, it's sort of like that is the precursor to the bite. Yeah, he's either angry and wants to leave or it's about to bite. But yeah.
Now we have had fish that we have thrown to literally 50 plus times and got them to eat eventually.
Yeah.
Just throwing here, wouldn't, throwing here, wouldn't, throw it. Like the guy just didn't turn it. Finally over in surprise, ate it. But literally like 53, I was like, are you done throwing yet? We can keep pulling. And whenever you're ready, fucking eats like, oh yeah.
It's like definitely one of those fish that'll keep you guessing because I've done the same thing at that same canal where I dropped a chunk of meat on their face. I'm like, there's no way they're going to turn that down. And they still don't. I'm like, what in the hell? Is it full? Like, is it full?
An instinctual trigger, I feel like, still that you can sometimes get still.
Well, I don't know, man. I think like the common theme with you is this pursuit of non-traditional species, and that's why I love your stuff. I speak my language, you know what I mean? And yeah, and you do alligator gar, longnose gar, probably even the spotted gar and short nose gar.
Yeah, when the carp are spawning, we can go in there and catch them on the same flies. Yeah, up to 10 pounds sometimes when they're all the females show up.
Well, I see the carp woodwork in the background, that piece you have in the back. So I know you do a lot of carp fishing on the fly, and I've also seen your photos. I've seen your photos of the buffalo as well. Yeah. So I want to maybe we'll move through this one sort of quickly. I don't want to lose our time here. But that's one of those interesting ones because they look so similar, but it's two species of fish. I don't know a lot of people that fly fish for buffalo. Yeah. What is the difference there? Like, I was like, oh, that's cool. He's fly fishing for buffalo. Is that the same thing, or is there like some big differences?
There's some crossover, but a little different fish for sure. Like obviously one's native, one's not. Buffalo are native, commons are. Commons are way more aggressive in their feeding habits. Like you put a fish in that 6-inch V in front of their nose and it hits the bottom, or a fly, and it hits the bottom in front of their nose, they're going to eat it pretty much. As long as they see it. Bright orange is my go-to because they'll eat it and I can see it. But the buffalo, on the other hand, are not quite so jumpy on the fly. Like I always say, they have like a feed zone, like 50-inch piece right in front of their nose. Like that's where you want it. And they're feeding on bugs and clams and stuff, mostly facing upriver. And they really won't move. They they have little black beady eyes. They're not really like sight fishing predators, I feel like.
Yeah.
Every now and again, you get one that will zoom over for a worm fly, like a red or a wine-colored worm fly. Every now and again, one will eat a damsel nymph or whatever. But I think if you would go and pump their stomachs, they're eating a lot of like scuds and just little nymphs like trout do. And so it can be a little more difficult, but you go there, you downsize, size 10, stuff like that, and can get the fly in front of them, they will eat it. Little gray mop fly, all kinds of little size 10 stuff, though. But yeah, more traditional style bugs for them, and except for the worm, because they'll take a red salmon worm, or they call it a hybrid carp fly. It's imitating worms or clams, because they eat the bigger the buffalo get, the more clams they eat, as well as the common carp. I think once they all kind of hit 10 or 15 pounds, they become real muscle eaters. But yeah, a little more difficult. They don't fight quite as hard as the common carp either.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
baggy, but they have their days. It can be spunky. We get a couple different tree seed things that happen, like the elm tree seeds and the cottonwood seeds. The elm trees, you'll see them get on it a little bit. The commons love it, but the buffalo really like the cottonwood seeds. So if you can find a bunch of cottonwood seeds running into a log pile in current, you'll see little buffalo mouths eating, and you can get them on dry fly, which is pretty cool. And they're pretty surprised. You get a little tussle out of them for a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of the general rundown. They're just a little different, but kind of similar in a way too. You could probably take what the trout guys do with an indicator and have a lot more success than just sight fishing them with a single fly.
Yeah.
I don't do it as much. I look for like big singles doing the right thing, and then I'll throw to them. But they're all catchable. The bigger, the better. The bigger his mouth is, the more he's probably eating bigger meals.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of the buffalo rundown. Expect frustration.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like the carp has become this massive target for the fly fishermen, like across the country. They've really like exploded. But the buffalo is like one of those ones where it's like, man, you talk about a fish that can get 70 pounds. Like,
I've caught 40 pounds on doing Eurocarp and stuff in Austin.
Yeah, I've done the same. I've done the same on Lake Fork and some of that with the bait, and it's but from a fly standpoint, gosh, when you think about if there's an opportunity to catch a 60-pound buffalo, because you think of all the challenges they present, obviously just in sheer size, the timid behavior, the small strike radius, the fact you have a 60-pound fish with a mouth that's as big as like a nickel. And you gotta and they're sensitive too. Like even bait fishing, I remember, I fished, like, shout out to my buddy Austin Anderson, is like, he's like the buffalo king out there as far as like Euro style. And this kid's caught so many giant ones. But we fished with him 2 years ago, and it's crazy, like the difference. And you have these two fish that live side by side. There's a lot of crossover in like where they hang out and some behaviors, but a lot of differences. Like the common carp will just grab the bait and go. The buffalo, but the buffalo was like, dude, he caught one that was 61 pounds when we were out there with him. I caught one that was 50 pounds. These damn fish, like I'm talking about, the rod would be like barely moving. Yeah. Like you got this 60-pound fish just nibbling like a bluegill. Yeah, such a challenging fish, but I think on fly, man, that is a species I would love to see like some more attention around. I don't know, these big fat lumbering fish that don't typically take lures.
They're a challenge. People just gotta understand what they're getting themselves into when they target them.
Yeah.
And for a lot of clients, they want something a little faster, a little more agreeable. If we were to just target buffalo all day, like we might catch 5, like our best day, without, not counting snagged fish, because you're going to snag if you're being honest, it's happening, But common carp, I've had days where I've caught 24, like sight fishing them with a fly. Just way more agreeable, way more of them willing to bite. Fight harder, so it's hard to push the buffs unless it's the right person. That's been one reluctance there. Other than that, we don't really see those big 50, 60 pounders get up shallow.
That's what I'm thinking. I would figure they're probably
20 pounders is at the biggest. That's probably my biggest on flies, about 15. Now on the bayou in Houston, about as big as they get, they eventually can't fit on the flat. Some of them are so big, so usually it's like 10 pounds can fit. Smaller ones can't. And the concrete bayou has like flats, angles, deep channel, and you can't really see in the middle. You have to wait for the fish to come on the flat or feed on the edge.
That's definitely one of those species that's like, man, I would love the opportunity to spend some time trying to crack that code. You know, you see the bow guys, like the bow fishermen, like get the gigantic big mouth buffalo and some of the black buffalo so big.
They come in at night, though. You know, if you
It
go out
must
at
be
night
it,
on
yeah.
rivers and you shine a light out at night when you're paddling, buffalo everywhere. Do
Yeah.
that same run an hour after daylight, they've all moved where they are. It's just a safety thing for them. They want to
Yeah.
feed. There's a lot of bugs and other stuff for them to eat. But once that sun comes up, you know, there's birds and other things for them to worry about. Of course, you think they'd adapt to the both thing, but
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the word client, and I want to go down that road because that is I think it's awesome that you're able to have a business for yourself doing what you love, but also it's like, you know, you're a steward for these lesser, I don't even say lesser desired fish, but you know, species that need to be championed a little bit more. So I'm interested, just, you know, I don't know anything about the guide world. I have had inquiries from people overseas asking if I would take them fishing for these stuff. So I
yeah,
know the interest is there.
definitely there. Yeah.
But like the people that are reaching out to you, what are most of them wanting to target? Like, is the alligator gar the big sell, or like, you know, I don't know, man. Tell me a little bit about the experience. You know,
So
the
the
interest that.
a little newer for me, but largemouth bass sell the most
Okay,
out of
okay.
everything I do for sure. Largemouth. We're in Texas, and we get a lot of them. Great river fishing on the Brazos for largemouth. It's been stellar the last few days, like
Mm-hmm.
stupid good. And then with Lake Conroe stuff, I had a guy catch a 10.7 pound largemouth on fly last year, or this last
Jeez.
year. But it's been like my go-to, and then getting that big fish has been really helpful. White bass do really well for me early
Mm-hmm.
in the run. Great for beginners and kids. And so, like fly fishing, you know, has a bit of a learning curve, and it's a great one to learn to cast and everything, and catch fish at the same time because you can just throw the fly in there and catch a white bass. So we get to like put everything else together. And then from there, I start doing all the other weird stuff like carp, bowfin, gar. The gar again, I've always kind of had it as my repertoire, if I could talk. But no one's ever really. I didn't realize like the interest, I guess, at first, and no one ever really pushed me enough to like really dabble in it until the last 2 years. Me and my buddy started kind of nerding out on it. My other buddy from Canada was in town and had gotten some big ones on fly. Uh, but yeah, I think I lost where I was going.
No, that's, I mean, you're going the right way because I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, I would think, especially people who come from, I don't know, out of town or even out of state, you know, if they're going to leave with a fish story.
So I expect my summers are a little slower, and I expect the alligator gar to hopefully fill that for me at least a little bit.
Yeah, I
The
think
boat
that one
thing
is,
does all right for me. Carp do okay for me. Not everyone likes carp fishing as much as you maybe think. It's not like
mm,
the third best selling thing I do. It's like maybe the third.
yeah. Well,
But yeah,
I think the
bass.
alligator guard thing is, it seems like in the last few years, like chasing them with artificials or chasing with flies really started to take hold and interest. But you know, you think about guys that travel though, and then let's say they didn't even have any intentions of catching an alligator gar. You just happen to put them on one. Like they come with an open mind, they're going to catch some bass and some white bass, and then, you know, if they go home and they're going to like recap the experience that they had with you, and part of that experience was catching even a 4 foot long alligator gar, which by most standards is a small alligator gar, and that is a big fish. And they're going to look at, you know, it's one of those fish that the photos stops people. Like, they're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, if you want some
So,
likes on Instagram, post an alligator gar.
well, I would even think inquiries as a guide. It's like, hey, man, I heard about these alligator gar, but like, I want to throw flies at them. I know people like that. They're like, I want to catch these alligator gar, but I don't want to go throw. I don't want to go sit on a chunk. I don't want to go sit on the bank and waiting with meat. Like,
No,
I want to
I
catch
want
these
to go
things.
at it tarpon muskie style. That's the way I want to go at it with flies.
Yeah.
You're willing to be grindy, go muskie style, sight fish, throw to rollers. Like I'm your guy. But yeah, just to add to how committed I am to that, I bought a 17-foot bass tracker. I'm decking it out to run the Trinity and the lower parts of the Brazos and stuff, and obviously do the lake bass fishing. But I expect that to be a bigger deal and be able to do pretty good. I'm hoping at least, you know.
Yeah, well, stay ahead of the game. I don't know. It's like, there's certain booms in like fishing genres that like they're predictable. They're like inevitable. Like you look at a fish like an alligator gar, and it's just like, man, their popularity is like, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
It's like they're.
I think we're just now building like how there's musky nuts. We're just now building the alligator gar nuts, and as people realize what all they can do, the whole range, bait fish, lure fish, small rattle traps, big musky lures. Because I've seen some guys doing that too. Flies, different ways to fly fish, full sink, intermediate, sight fish. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just another perfect predator that's been underrated for too long.
Yeah, well, if you're just casually sharpening your sword and learning your fishery even more, especially now that you've moved, and you've kind of got that in your back pocket when inevitably people say, hey,
for me was just open up the whole state to me, whereas I was kind of locked in my 2-hour drives around Houston at the most. Now I fish from Houston to North Texas and a little in between. I'm willing to drive 3 hours for good fishing and taking people fishing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's always interesting to me. Is what's that?
Unless gas doubles, and then it might change to a couple lakes.
Oh, jeez, I know. Well, that's awesome, dude. Well, I know we're getting a little short on time. I got to pick up from gymnastics here in a minute. But the people that the people that want to see your stuff, let's say, because you got some awesome photos and even videos of the bowfin, the alligator gar, the longnose gar, the bass. I think when I was looking through your stuff, I think I saw the big bass. Was it an older gentleman that caught it?
Yeah. Tom. Yeah. Tom.
Monster fish. You got an awesome fishery. So I would urge anybody to
for those bass in an unconventional way too, which is just kind of my style.
Yeah.
Fishing heavy scum with a fly rod, like I have this weedless fly, I don't have it with me, that I've kind of come up with, and we just had this epic topwater day. He's kind of dissing my weedless fly. I'm like, they're in here sometimes, whatever. And that fish fucking eats. And he's like, this fly's awesome.
Yeah.
It was so cool. And he just went to Mexico and fished, came back, and we caught a bigger bass than he caught in Mexico. So I was like,
oh, you gotta love that. Yeah.
It felt pretty good. And then I still haven't caught a 10-pounder myself. So to see that, be a part of it, net that fish, it was fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I haven't joined the double-digit bass club yet. I need to start trying more. Like I really want. Dude. I have been like pegged as like the trash fish guy. I'm like trying to tell people like, no, I love bass fishing. Yeah. I do a lot of my bass fishing in Florida in the winter time. We have phenomenal winter bass fishing. Yeah. So like, rest assured, in January I'm gonna be out there bass fishing like crazy. But dude, I want a 10-pound bass so bad.
I'll be out on Lake Conroe. I'm there for bass 90% of the time, but everyone still calls me the bowfin guy.
Well, that's where I am too. Is like I embrace it at this point. I'm like the bowfin guy. Actually, I just got invited onto a podcast next week to talk about bowfin. I'm like, I just came back from the Amazon.
Yeah,
like I'll be the bowfin guy. That's all good. I'll be your bowfin guy. I'm cool with that. You know what? Whatever. But hey, man, Danny, where can people find your stuff? Like your website for your guide service, Instagram, anything where people might be able to see some of your stuff. A YouTube channel if you have that going on.
So still HoustonFlyFishing.com is my website. Obviously, I'm not just doing Houston stuff, but that's where I started. It's been published in books and whatever, so I'm kind of stuck with it for now. And then Instagram, Houston Fly Fishing. YouTube, Fly Fishing with Danny. And then Facebook, Danny Scarborough. Whatever you want to look at.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'll put all that stuff up on the screen. I'll put it in the descriptions. I'll try to throw it out there. Who knows? Maybe
appreciate it, man.
Maybe you'll get some business out of it, or maybe I don't know. You'll get a couple of likes and subscribes. But
well, we're going into winter, so we're going into our winter stuff. But hey, next year, come alligator gar fishing, come bowfin fishing, come bass, whatever. I do it all. I kind of go with the hot bite throughout the year, and that's just the way my head works.
Well, dude, I'm chomping at the bit to get back out to Texas for alligator gar, but I'm like determined. Like I've done the meat thing, I've done the carp chunks. I really want. I'm not even a great fly fisherman, but I really want to. I really want that experience in the memory bank. You know what I mean? So the next time I come out there, I may have to give you a holler because I want to catch an alligator gar on a fly. But Danny, I appreciate your time, man, and we'll be in touch. And thank you for your time, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for listening to Boundless Pursuit. Tune in each week as we bring stories and insight from uniquely talented anglers and outdoorsmen. And if you enjoyed this show, I want to hear from you. Be sure to leave a 5-star review, as this is going to drive the growth and exposure of this show. And if you have feedback or guest suggestions, I would love to hear from you. And you can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com. For all other collections of media and contact information, please visit www.boundless-pursuit.com.